There is a stone in a quiet Ontario cemetery. The grass grows up around it. The name cut into it is Lundy. For most of a century, the people who carried this family forward did not know that name was theirs. They were Masons. They had always been Masons. And the man who made them Masons took the truth with him on purpose and tried to bury it deeper than any grave. We found it anyway. Not one of us, all of us. And not all at once, but slowly, across generations. Because the truth about this family is that the Lundees have always been a people who reach back, a people who could not let the past go. It came back through reunions held in towns most of us had never seen, through sisters who spent years walking old graveyards and writing away for records, through an aunt who pressed an old man until he finally said where his own father had been born, through a grandson who chased the Lundees for the better part of 20 years and could not stop, through boxes of papers and photographs that passed quietly from hand to hand until they reached someone who would finally read them. This is the story those papers told. It is a story of hardship, of what each generation carried and what each generation lost. It is the story of a family that crossed an ocean, broke a frontier, lost its own name, and 4 generations later, came looking for it. Every family carries a name, and every name carries a country. This is the story of how we found our way back. To understand where this ends, a sod farmhouse on the North Dakota plains, a runaway boy on a prohibition road, you have to begin somewhere we almost could not reach at all. You have to begin in the old country, and the records, when we finally found the right ones, did not point quite where the family stories said they would. Before Ireland, there was Scotland. We cannot prove it with a single line in a parish book, so we will not pretend to. But 2 things lean hard that way, and they lean together. The first is the name itself. Lundy is a Scottish name taken from the land, from the old estates of Lundin in Fife and Lundy in Angus. And the second is the blood. Generations later, a simple DNA test would come back nearly a third Scottish and Ulster Scots, and almost all of it on one side, the Lundy side. What the surname suggests, the blood confirms. These were Ulster Scots, Scottish Presbyterian people, planted into the north of Ireland in the 1600s, a century or more before our story truly begins. They came to rest in the border country of Cavan and Monaghan, in the old province of Ulster, a hard, green, hilly country of small farms and stone walls and Presbyterian meeting houses. They were tenant farmers. They grew flax for the linen trade. The records show a Lundy growing flax in the parish of Knockbride as early as 1796. This was not a family of wealth. It was a family of wealth, of people holding on to rented ground in a country where the ground was never finally theirs. And here the trail goes back as far as the record will carry us, and then it stops. The furthest man we can name with certainty is Joseph Lundy, born around the year 1780. His own father's name is gone, lost in a register that was never kept, or did not survive the centuries. That absence is part of our story too, a man whose own father we cannot yet name, the very edge of the known world, the place where the trail goes dark. It is the reason a grandson keeps looking. It is the reason an aunt went all the way to Ireland to stand on the ground herself. The wall at the top of this family is the engine of the whole story. So why does a family leave? A people who had farmed the same border parishes for 100 years. Why do they gather everything they own and put it on a ship? The records give us the shape of an answer, and the rest we reason out. They did not leave because they were starving. They left in the early decades of the 1800s, a full generation before the Great Famine that would empty Ireland. They did not leave alone, and they did not leave in despair. They left as part of a whole cluster of intermarried families, Lundees and Wallaces together, crossing as one. That is not the picture of a refugee. That is the picture of a clan deciding with open eyes that its future lay somewhere else. The reason was land. 10 children need land, and Ireland had less of it every year. farms divided and divided again until a man could not feed his family on what was left. And perhaps, as Scots who had never been fully Irish, they had always known this ground was not finally theirs. We know the crossing happened because the record survives. In the Canada Land Petitions, preserved in the public archives, a Lundy is set down in plain ink, a native of the county of Monaghan, Ireland, a man with a wife and children who had crossed the Atlantic, taken the oath of allegiance, and was now asking the crown for land. Land to clear, land to improve, land to begin again. The crossing did not deliver them straight to a farm. For a time the family laboured on the Great Canal at Niagara, the enormous ditch being dug by hand to lift ships around the falls. It was hard and dangerous work, and it cost them. But out of it came their foothold. Through the Wallace side of the family, the Lundees came into roughly 100 acres of land in Mono Township in the fine rolling uplands of central Ontario. And so, at last, they went up onto ground of their own. They are there still. Joseph Lundy and his wife lie in Burns Cemetery in Mono, Ontario, the documented top of our family, the first Lundees we can stand over and name. We have found their stones, we have read them. They are the place where this family stops being a story and starts being a fact. In Mono Township, the family that crossed became a family that belonged. Joseph's son John grew up and married Sarah Ann Skelton, who had come as a child of 6 from County Armagh. She is worth naming, because the Irishness this family always felt in its bones came as much from women like her, the Skeltons and the other in-married Ulster families, as from the Lundees themselves. This is the quiet middle of the story, the part that makes no legends. A generation or two of Lundees clearing land, raising children, burying parents, building a life out of an Ontario township. From a distance, it looks like nothing happened. But something was being built. You can see it in the children. The land was a country of maple bush and apple orchards and wild berries, and the Lundy children grew up the way farm children grew up, then, at work before light and after dark. But this was a family that prized something beyond the farm. They prized the mind. There was a girl in that same Ontario, Susan Elizabeth Kirk, whose story would one day join this one, and who shows you exactly what these people valued. She was 4 years old in 1859 when she first walked into the Shannon School in Caledon Township, County of Peel. She was a quick one. She would sit and listen to the older classes and put up her hand to answer their questions. She carried her lunch in a little half-gallon syrup pail. She passed every subject but drawing by the age of 10, and she kept going. Boarded away from home for $1 a month, shuttled from house to house all the way through high school in Orangeville, and then through a teacher training course where she studied psychology and said it opened up a new world. She did something rare for a farm girl of her generation. She became a school teacher. That was the true inheritance of this family. Not money, but questing minds. Hold on to her. She is coming back. In 1874, in that same Mono Township, John and Sarah Ann Skelton's son was born, the youngest of 8 children, a boy named Robert, and Robert Lundy would not stay put. What happened to him, and what it did to his mother, is the wound this whole film turns on. He grew up like the others. He milked 8 cows night and morning, attended the one-room school, and when the chores were done, he burned the midnight coal oil reading every book the little school library owned. He had a memory people remembered all their lives. He could recite long passages of Robert Burns and Walter Scott, whole and word for word, to the end of his days. And he carried something more than a farm. He carried a pride in the name itself. He claimed to be a direct descendant of the owner of the farm on which the Battle of Lundy's Lane was fought in the War of 1812, and he could never hear the old song from Queenston Heights and Lundy's Lane without his pulse quickening. Robert began the way so many younger sons begin, working another man's dream. He farmed in partnership with his older brother, the two of them raising the place with their own hands, in his own words. Prodigious work on house and barn, as well as new crab fences. And then it was taken from him. He wrote it down plainly, 50 years later. the way a man records a thing he has carried a long time. His older brother let him out without recompense, no share, no stake. For all those years of labor, he got nothing and was put off the land he had helped build. And here is the heart of it. The very next line in his memoir is the one that still aches a century on. The broken-hearted mother died the following year. That is Sarah Ann Skelton, the girl who came from Armagh, now an old woman in Minot, who watched her family split and her son cast out and did not survive the grief of it. She is the first mother in this story to be broken by a son's leaving. She would not be the last. Sir Robert went west, not for adventure, because there was nothing left for him at home. And it was a hard leaving. He loved that country. It was a hard decision, he wrote, to turn my back on the land of the maple leaf. But there was no land for him in Ontario anymore, so he set his face toward a place he had only heard of, to find ground no brother could take from him. He left home on a Monday. By Tuesday he was in Chicago. He missed his connections, waited 3 days at Rugby for the branch train, and after more than a week and 1,500 miles, he stepped down at Bottineau, North Dakota, in his own words, with a cash reserve of 60 cents. The street, he remembered, was lined with ox teams and Western Broncos. That very evening he found a farm job at $18 a month, then carpentry at $1 a day, until the boss skipped town, owing him 6 weeks' wages. That money, Robert wrote dryly, I still have coming. The autumn of '98 taught him what the prairie asked of a man. Shock threshing at $1.50 a day, breakfast at 5, dinner at noon, supper at 9:30, 15.5-hour days, no cook cars. He slept in a wagon box or a straw stack. It wasn't worth taking his shoes off. That nightmare, he said, lasted 42 days. And then there were the oxen. 3 giant animals, 1,900 pounds apiece. The best trained team he ever saw. They ploughed a furrow so straight, he said, that he could have fired a rifle bullet down it. He was, he admitted, so proud of those oxen that it hurt. But the prairie gave and the prairie took. One day, an electric storm rolled through, and 15 minutes later he found one of his great workers dead, killed by a single bolt of lightning. There was the blizzard so fierce he watched the galvanized stovepipe go end over end through the garden and cook 3 days on a tiny heater while a boy was sent out an upstairs window to dig the front door free. There were winters of 44 below, hauling wood 15 miles from the Turtle Mountains before daylight, 2 blankets to a horse, frozen sandwiches thawed on the animals' warm backs. Then, in 1900, the country he was waiting for opened a flat, treeless block 60 miles by 25, thrown open to homesteaders. The railroad pushed on to West Hope and bridged the Mouse River, and Robert's homestead lay within a mile of the town and the water. Flax was the regulation first crop. The prairie, he wrote, waiting for long centuries, rewarded us well the first year. 1 load of lumber from Bottineau built his house, and he banked it with sod against the cold. On still nights the stray oxen scraped the mosquitoes off the walls, and he felt, he said, that he was rocked in the cradle of the plains. In spring the sunshine flooded in. The daylight ran from 3:30 in the morning until 11 at night, and the meadowlark seemed to tell him, "It's a very fine day today." And Robert Lundy looked out over his ground and wrote the line that says everything about that whole generation. I was a king on my 160 smiling acres. It took 5 years. In 5 years, he wrote, I had a good barn and a 2-roomed house. And then his memoir ends on a single human line. Now, he wrote, I needed a good Ontario wife. He went back and married one, Susan Elizabeth Kirk, the schoolteacher from Caledon, the girl with the syrup pail and the questing mind. He brought her home to the prairie. The prairie that had taken so much now gave back a family. Robert and Susan raised 10 children on that ground, 6 boys and 4 girls. In 1917, they built a new house, the grandest in the country, they joked, though for a while it stood half empty of furniture. There had been appendicitis that year, and lightning, and never quite enough money at once. The storms never let up. One cyclone took 17 barns in the district. The Lundees rebuilt, smaller, and went on. Why, Susan wondered, such awful electric storms in North Dakota? Then came the hardest test of all, the Dust Bowl and the Depression. For 7 straight years, Robert did not get back as much seed wheat as he had planted. 7 years. And yet, this is the thing the children never forgot. It was simply taken for granted that every one of them would go to college. Jamestown College offered scholarships to the top 2 students of every high school class in the state, and the Lundy children reached for them and got them. As his daughter Loy wrote, "We were far from being rich, except in health, companionship, Christian teaching, and education." They never felt the depression at the table. They kept a cow. When an uncle in Edmonton mailed a roll of $500 and the envelope split open in transit, the money showing for anyone to see, it still arrived at West Hope intact. They bought honey 120 pounds at a time. "Good fresh bread and honey," Susan said. "Why wouldn't our children be smart?" And of those 10 children, she said only this: "My 10 children were my great treasure." And Robert? He spoke to the end with a slight Scotch burr. He was the square dance caller everyone wanted, because he sang the calls. He could recite Burns and Scott by the page. He was the best whistler in the county, and a passionate hunter of ducks and geese to his last season. And every hard-working day of his life ended the same way, kneeling in prayer beside his bed. A weakening heart finally forced him off the prairie to Portland, Oregon, and it broke his heart to leave the land. He gained 5 more good years. On his last day, he visited an old friend, planned a ball game for that evening, and wrote a letter to a lifelong North Dakota friend, urging him to get the shotguns oiled up. He'd be out for the full hunting. Then he went to the backyard to pick plums, came in tired and sat down. His wife heard a strange sound and ran in. She found him not in his chair, but kneeling beside it, as if in prayer. The habit of a lifetime had prevailed. Robert Lundy died as he'd lived, on his knees, the pioneer, in his children's words, talking himself across the threshold into the great new adventure. But years before Robert ever left for Portland, back when the farm was still full of children, one of those children was already pulling away from all of it. In 1915, on that North Dakota farm, into that strict and religious household, Robert and Susan had a son. They named him Robert Kenneth Lundy, and he is the one who would lose us our name. He did not fit the farm. The strict religious Lundy home that held the whole family together was, to him, a thing to run from. And in 1929, at the age of 14, he ran. Of all the hard things in a hard life, he would say near the end of it, that was the hardest one, leaving home. And here, the wound of the first generation opens again in the second. A century before, a mother named Sarah Ann had been broken when her son was forced off the land. Now Susan Kirk would lose a son who chose to go, and by the family's own telling, carried down through his sisters, she never gave up hope that he would come back, and grieved that boy to the end of her days. The same wound, opening twice, in the same family. What the boy became and how he lost the name depends on who in the family is telling it, and the family keeps both stories. Some remember it began out at Lake Met-E-Goshi on the Canadian line, in the dry years of Prohibition, when he ran liquor across the border one step ahead of the sheriff and, in his own recorded words, changed his name every week or so. And one of those names, Mason, simply stuck. Others tell it quieter, that he drifted all the way to Eureka on the Northern California coast, started a refrigeration business, worked the fishing boats and trapped crabs in the lean times, did a few things he wasn't proud of, and somewhere in there took the name Mason for reasons more practical than dramatic. and that by the time he had built a whole life on it, bank credit, identification, a driver's license, it had simply become too hard to change it back. The family keeps both. What no one disputes is the result. The boy who ran from the Lundy farm became Robert Mason, and the name Lundy went underground for 3 generations. He married Betty on Christmas Day 1933. He lived a restless, searching life, a tramp miner in 100 things besides, across Montana, Nevada, Oregon, Colorado, Idaho, Texas, and New Mexico, dragging a new family from state to state. But everywhere he went, he did one quiet thing. In every new town, he opened the telephone directory and looked for the name Lundy. He would call the ones he found, asking, hoping. For years, it came to nothing. Once, for 2 whole years while he mined in Oregon, he traded in the very same stores as his own sister June, and neither of them ever knew. Then came the war, and the family paid the price every American family of that generation feared. Robert Kenneth, the runaway, chose the service over a jail cell and went to war. First the Army in Europe, through the Battle of the Bulge, then Navy PT boats in the Pacific. But it was his brother who did not come home. Wallace Lundy, the 10th and last of the children, the name still intact, was killed in the fighting in the Philippines on Leyte Island on the 24th of February 1945, a son of the prairie lost in the Pacific. 2 brothers went to that war under 2 different names. Only one of them came home, and the one who came home was no longer a Lundy at all. By then, the old farm was gone, sold off when Robert and Susan moved west. The frontier life the memoir had celebrated was finished, and out in the world, under another name, the wayward son kept moving and kept searching the phone books, certain, after everything he had done, that they would not want him back. The wayward son raised children of his own, Stephen, Sandy, Gwen, Tim, and Danny among them. In 1950, in Carlsbad, New Mexico, came the one whose line would pull this whole thread back together, a son named Tim Mason. Tim's childhood was a hard one in its own right. The constant moving, a family that came apart, a boy largely raising himself by the time he was 14 or 15. The hardship, it turns out, runs in the blood. But Tim is part of the reason we know any of this, because it was Tim and his brother Danny who first came across a box of their father's papers and found, inside it, another man, their own father, under another name, born in North Dakota, surname Lundy. They did not think much of it for years. It didn't seem to lead anywhere, but it had been seen. The name had surfaced just long enough to be remembered, and one day, when the rest of the family came looking, that buried memory would matter. Here is what the lost son never knew. Out there searching the phone books, the family had never let him go. 2 years before he came home in the summer of 1974, the Lundees gathered back at West Hope for a reunion. They walked the old farm that all the Lundy children called home. They counted the ponds and the hillsides, giving each one its old name. They named the wildflowers, and among the photographs they passed from hand to hand was one of the brother who had vanished. We saw a picture of Bob, his sister Edna wrote, with his 8th grade, genial, good-looking, and our memories grew. 2 years before he ever found his way back, the whole family was already remembering him, together. They had never stopped. And while one brother searched the phone books out west, his sisters were doing the patient work that would actually find the way back, not to him at first, but to the whole family's roots. Lloyd joined the Ontario Genealogy Society. A man named John Henry, who had grown up neighbour to the Lundees, sent her long letters and a hand-drawn map of the old Mono farms. The sisters did research at the Family History Library in Salt Lake City, and then Loy and Bernice made the pilgrimage themselves back to Mono Centre, Ontario. A thrilling experience, Loy wrote, to walk in the footsteps of our forefathers. They visited the graveyards and the museums. they met a man who held in his own hands a cannonball retrieved from the field of Lundy's Lane. The recovery of this family's name was never one person's doing. It was the family's own work, carried in large part by its daughters across decades. And there was an aunt, Sandy, who would not let the question rest, who pressed the old man until he finally said where his own father had been born, and chased the answer down until the lost branch and the found family could be brought together at last. And then, in 1976, the lost brother came home. On the ferry to Powell River, British Columbia, his own voice was recorded. He was, he said, going back to my family after being absent for 47 years, after running away from home at the age of 14. He searched the faces on the deck for anyone he might know. His heart pounded, he said, like it used to when I used to shoplift. He had always been afraid they would not want to see him after the things he had done. He was sorry his mother and father had passed without ever seeing him again. He need not have feared. 70 people gathered at Powell River, the 9 surviving children of Robert and Susan Kirk Lundy and their families. One family drove 6,000 miles round trip from Kilgore, Texas to be there. When he stepped off the ferry, he was amazed they all looked so young, and prouder of them, he said, than he could say. After 47 years, the man who had searched 100 phone books for his own name was home, and he was a Lundy again. When it was over, his sister Edna tried to say what the homecoming had meant. What worth was there for us, she wrote, who took ourselves back to the tangible past? Was it good to plough deep in the soil of remembrance? And she answered her own question. Yes, there was much to gain in the return to the land. They walked the coulees and named the ponds. They remembered a brother by his 8th grade picture. They bowed their heads for Wallace and for the parents now gone. The parents who, as Edna wrote, left us good health questing minds. Few riches they chose or clung to, but knowledge they had. We applaud. That is the truth of this family, and the truth of how the name came home. It was never one person who would not give up. It was a long line of Lundees who could not stop reaching back. The ones who stayed, and the one who left. The brother who searched the phone books for 47 years. The sisters who kept the letters and walked the old graveyards. The aunt who would not stop asking. The grandson who is still pulling the thread today. Generation after generation, the same refusal to forget. Together they ploughed the soil of remembrance. Together they brought the name back home. The name of frightened man spent his whole life trying to erase did not disappear, because a family is more than a name on a license. It is a flax field in Ulster, and a canal at Niagara, and a sod shack on the Mouse River, and 10 children sent to college through 7 years of dust. It is all of it, and it is ours, and it does not vanish because one man was afraid of it. And in the end, even he found his way back, to Powell River, to his brothers and sisters, to the family he came from. We are Masons, we were Lundees, and now, together, we know both.